I was part of his success. And he never mentioned me. Not during. Not before. Not after. I was not forgotten. I was abandoned. It had snowed that morning, soft and clean, covering the street in silence. I woke up before him, as always. Not because I had to, because I hoped, maybe today, he'd see me. Really see me. He had an awards ceremony that evening. The culmination of everything he'd worked for. Years of effort, sacrifice, long nights. But it wasn't just his effort. Not really. We both knew that, even if he never said it out loud. I had done everything but stand on the stage. And still, I baked the cinnamon buns he loved so much. Warm, sweet, soft. Like the way I used to speak to him. We sat at the small kitchen table. I placed his plate in front of him, hands slightly trembling, a child waiting for a grade. I took a breath and said it simply, without fanfare. I got promoted. He didn't even look up. And then he stabbed a piece of bun with his fork. That's cute. What's it for again? Admin stuff? He chuckled, a sound as careless as it was cruel. Guess it's finally paying off to be the one who stays behind. Then, just like that, the moment was gone, replaced by talk of his suit, the venue, and how his ex might show up and try to steal attention. I looked down at my coffee. The warmth had vanished. That evening I did what I always do. Pressed his shirt. Polished his shoes. Checked the RSVP list for his event. The one I wasn't technically invited to but was expected to manage. Like a secretary who also happened to live with him. As he rehearsed his lines in the mirror, I corrected the pacing. Swapped a weak metaphor. Polished his closing sentence. Stronger this way, I said. He nodded without thanking me. I watched him from across the room. He looked like a man with a future. I felt like a woman he'd already filed away. The venue was bright and echoing, a modern space with high ceilings and eager smiles. I stood behind him as people offered praise, compliments, admiration. He introduced me only once, and only as a friend. It was a small, strange death. The lights dimmed. His name was called. People clapped. He took the stage like he was born there. He began the speech. Confident. Articulate. The cadence we had practiced landed perfectly. I watched the room fall silent in admiration. He thanked his mentors, his team, his university, even his dog. That detail got a warm laugh. But he didn't say my name. Not even a vague mention. Not my partner, not the person who stood by me, not even someone who kept me grounded. Nothing. As if I had been air. As if I had never existed at all. After the speech, I stood in the corner while guests surrounded him. They toasted, smiled, clapped him on the back. One woman leaned in close and whispered something into his ear. He laughed. I held his coat and smiled like a ghost. No one noticed me. Not even him. Especially not him. We got home around midnight. The cold air had made my hands numb. I waited for him to say something. Anything. Maybe a quiet, "Did you see how well it went?" Maybe even, "Thanks." But he didn't. He walked in, dropped his keys on the counter, and said, "Phew. What a night." Then he opened his laptop and began replying to congratulatory emails. My promotion never came up. Not once. I went into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, but it didn't help the burning in my chest. I opened my phone and reread the one congratulatory message I'd gotten from a colleague that morning. Well earned. They finally noticed what you do. But he didn't. He hadn't. Even on the day I shared something of my own, I was reduced to a detail in his world, one that didn't fit into the narrative he wanted to present. He was the self-made genius. I was just background noise. I sat in the dark dining room and let the silence thicken around me. The lights from outside made long shadows across the floor, like cracks in something I hadn't realized was already broken. It wasn't that he forgot. It was that he didn't care. Not before the speech when I offered my news and he laughed. Not during the speech when he erased every trace of me from his story. Not after the speech when I stood beside him, smiling for the camera while he stood alone in his spotlight. Resentment didn't arrive loudly. It sank in like slow water into dry earth. It settled into my spine, into the space behind my eyes, into the quiet decision I didn't know I'd already made. I went to our bedroom and sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. My fingers trembled as I removed my earrings. They weren't expensive, a gift I bought for myself years ago, after he forgot my birthday. I looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't look angry, just hollow, like someone had taken a soft eraser to the edges of who I used to be. And that was when the memory came, uninvited and sharp. The old hard drive. The drafts. The data. The edits. The research from his early projects, not just typed by me, but partially written. Structured. Annotated. My language, my logic, my insight. All scrubbed of my name before submission. He didn't just erase me tonight. He had been doing it for years. The difference now was, I finally saw it. Fully. He came to bed an hour later, humming under his breath. I closed my eyes and stayed still. He smelled like champagne and applause. When the light clicked off, I opened my eyes again and stared at the ceiling. My heart didn't race. I didn't cry. I just felt done. Not destroyed. Just emptied. Outside, the snow had started again, falling slow, endless, soft. It covered the world in silence. And in that silence, something inside me stirred. Not fury. Not even revenge. Not yet. Something quieter. Something colder. But sharper than anything I'd ever felt. A decision had started forming. And next time he stood on a stage like that, he just might have to explain who really built it beneath him. There was no explosion. No confrontation. Only silence. And that was somehow worse. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of him in the kitchen, humming as he made coffee. I didn't get up right away. I stared at the ceiling and let the quiet sit in my chest like something alive. My eyes burned, not from crying. I hadn't shed a single tear. But from something else. A tightness behind the eyes that comes from holding back too much for too long. The bedroom was cold. I reached for the blanket, then stopped halfway. My fingers curled around nothing. I sat up slowly, every movement deliberate, as though my body had forgotten what he's felt like. He called out from the kitchen. Want some coffee? The casualness of it struck like a slap. As if nothing had happened. As if I hadn't stood invisible beside him the night before. As if he hadn't stepped over my moment to deliver his own. I'll make my own, I said. Quiet. Even. Neutral. A pause. Then, suit yourself. The water from the faucet ran hot. Steam rose into the morning air, curling around my fingers as I rinsed a mug. It was the chipped one, the one I always used, even though we had newer ones. I liked it. It had history. Like me. He poured his coffee, grabbed his keys, and kissed the air near my cheek. Big meeting today, he said, halfway out the door. Wish me luck. I didn't. And he didn't notice. The door closed behind him. And the silence returned, thicker now, almost solid. I stood in the kitchen with my coffee, staring at the tile beneath my feet. That's when it started, a slow flood of memory. Not dramatic moments. Not screaming or betrayals. Just small, repeated acts of absence. When I was 9, I got the lead in the school play. My mother clapped politely and said, "Don't let it distract you from your grades." My brother won a participation trophy in some weekend soccer match, and she posted about it for days. At 13, I made a birthday cake for my dad. Spent hours on it. He smiled, said thanks, sweetheart, then pointed at the slice and asked if I had used the wrong kind of sugar. My sister handed him a store-bought card. He framed it. At 17, I got accepted into a competitive program. Nobody mentioned it at dinner. That same night, my cousin called. She'd failed a course. Everyone rallied around her. Poor thing. So much pressure on kids these days. She just needs support. Support. The word I was always expected to give. Never receive. I'd been a backdrop all my life. A frame around other people's portraits. A safe harbor for others' storms. The girl who didn't make a fuss. The one who understood. And I had carried that role into adulthood quietly, without resentment at first. It was just who I was. Who I had been taught to be. Until now. I sat at the dining table and picked up a framed photo that stood near the bookshelf. It was from 5 years ago, a conference in Boston. He was giving a talk. I stood beside him in the picture, smiling, proud. I remembered taking a Red-A flight to be there after pulling 3 consecutive late nights, helping him organize his notes. I'd gotten food poisoning that morning and still stood in the front row, clapping. He didn't remember that part. I turned the frame over and opened the back. Behind the photograph was a folded note, something I'd written him years ago. A love letter, soft and full of hope. I had written, "I know they'll all see how brilliant you are. I just hope you'll remember who saw it first." He hadn't. Later that day, I walked into the small storage room we rarely used. Old books, tax documents, boxes of forgotten cables. And at the back, stacked under a pile of papers, was the external hard drive. I pulled it free. It was heavier than I remembered. This was where it began, the early years. Before the awards. Before the ego. When we sat side by side, fueled by instant noodles and ambition. He had the passion. I had the structure. He brought the energy. I gave it direction. We had been a team. Or so I thought. I connected the drive to my laptop and opened the folders. My breath caught. It was all still there. Research notes. Drafts with my comments. Diagrams I had made. Outlines in my voice. Emails from him to me, saying things like, "Can you polish this part? Your phrasing's always better than mine. I'm stuck. Help me fix it." In the official version, those words never existed. I was never there. He had always been a one-man show. I sat back in the chair and stared at the screen, the glow of it pale against the dusk creeping in through the window. Resentment didn't come in one sharp burst. It came in layers, sediment pressed down over time, until the weight of it made everything still. It wasn't just about the award. It was every moment before and after, every look that passed over me, every time I bit back the need to say, "What about me?" and swallowed it instead. I was not bitter. I was exhausted. Exhausted from stretching myself to fill all the gaps, only to find there was never room for me. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. That would have been easier. A fire, a scream, a slammed door. What I felt was quieter. A mourning. For who I used to be. And for the woman I could have been if anyone had loved me without needing to be saved in return. That evening, he came home late, flushed with excitement. "You won't believe the feedback I got today," he said, dropping his coat on the back of the chair. "They might put me on the advisory panel. Can you imagine?" I nodded slowly, setting down a bowl of soup in front of him. "Love you," he said as he scrolled through his phone. I didn't answer. He didn't notice. And maybe that hurt more than anything else. After dinner, I returned to the study. The hard drive was still plugged in. I opened one more folder. This one was different. It held the original version of the thesis he had built his reputation on. The one that got him published. The one that started everything. My comments were everywhere. Suggestions. Edits. Additions. Clarifications. Entire blocks of text, lifted, paraphrased, polished with no acknowledgement. And in the metadata, my name. Clear. Undeniable. Proof. Not for others. For me. To remind myself that I had not imagined it, that my contribution had not been some desperate, overreaching dream. I had been there. I had mattered. I closed the laptop and leaned back. The snow was still falling outside. The window pane glowed with the reflection of the monitor. And in that moment, I felt something shift. Not rage. Not revenge. Not yet. But the first breath of a new kind of clarity. The kind that comes when silence becomes louder than shouting. When invisibility becomes a choice, not a punishment. And I began to understand. You don't have to be cruel to leave. You don't have to scream to say enough. Sometimes, the quietest people are the ones who carry the heaviest truths. And sometimes, the ones who build the foundation are the last to be thanked, until the whole thing starts to crack. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stopped. And to my surprise, he didn't even notice. Not at first. The snow hadn't melted in days. It clung to the rooftops, curled around streetlights, turned cars into ghosts. Even the air felt heavier, a stillness that pressed against the windows like a held breath. Inside, the apartment was warm. Perfect, actually. The lighting soft, the furniture arranged just how he liked it. We had built comfort here, or maybe I had built it around him. He sat at the table, buried in emails, drinking the coffee I made. As always, I placed his mug down without a word, no smile, no morning ritual. I just set it there and turned away. That was the first change. Small, but real. He looked up, mildly surprised. Everything okay? I nodded. That was enough for him. He went back to his phone. And I knew if he didn't see the difference now, he wouldn't notice the rest either. Not until it was too late. Later that morning, I logged into my bank account and stared at the familiar list of automatic payments. So many of them weren't mine. They were his. His subscriptions, his domains, his donations to organizations that quoted him as if he were a lone genius. 2 clicks. Cancel. 3 more. Unsubscribe. Done. No password requests, no confirmation calls. Just a gentle, "Your auto payment has been removed." I sat back in the chair. It was so simple. Easier than I imagined. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt nothing. Or maybe it was peace. That afternoon, instead of folding his laundry or filling in his conference RSVP, I took a walk. No errands. No destination. Just me and the snow. It stung my face in places, crept into my gloves. I let it. I passed people living their own small stories, a boy pulling a red sled, a woman on the phone crying quietly, a couple arguing under a street lamp. No one noticed me. And, for the first time in a long time, I didn't care. I wasn't anyone's background character out here. I was just alone. And oddly, I liked it. I bought myself a coffee, sat by the window, read a book I hadn't touched in months. Nobody asked me what time he needed to be picked up, or what he wanted for dinner, or if I had remembered to send that email he was supposed to write. There was quiet, and within it, I found space. When I got home, he was mid-conference call. Papers scattered across the dining table, his voice animated, selling ideas we once shaped together, only now they were his alone. He looked up and smiled in a half-distracted way, pointing to the kitchen. "Can you make tea?" he mouthed. I walked past him, straight into our room, closed the door. Not slammed, just closed. That was new. And I knew even if he wouldn't say it, he'd felt it. That night, while he slept, I sat at my desk with the soft glow of my laptop reflecting off the window. Snow continued falling outside, slow and steady. The hard drive was still connected. I hadn't touched it since I opened it days ago, but now my hand moved to it naturally, like my body remembered something before my mind did. I opened a folder marked draft_backups. Inside, the raw material of his career, thesis files, research notes, early presentations. My voice was everywhere. Not literally, of course. But I knew my touch, the pacing, the clarity, the phrasing that smoothed his scattered thinking into something that sounded coherent. He once said, "I'm the soul. You're the skeleton." I had laughed then. Now I understood how literal that had been. He stood tall because I held everything up. And now I was starting to let go. The next morning, I woke up and turned off every alarm tied to him. His calendar reminders. Birthday alerts for people he never remembered without me. The email notification for that journal submission he kept forgetting. Gone. He asked, "Hey, did you confirm my flight for next month?" I looked at him. Calm. "No. You didn't." "No." Pause. You usually do. Not this time. He didn't say anything after that. Just pulled out his phone, probably to do it himself. I didn't feel cruel. I felt honest. I had built his comfort with my silence. Now, I was reclaiming my voice by using fewer words. The next test came when an invitation arrived, another industry event, hosted by a colleague who once mistook me for his assistant. He held up the envelope, smiling. Looks like you'll need that black dress again. I said nothing. He frowned. You're coming, right? I looked at him. No. What do you mean, no? I mean exactly that. A long pause. He laughed awkwardly. Are you mad about something? No. Then why? I'm not needed there. He blinked. That's ridiculous. I smiled, and there was no softness in it. Is it? That evening I made soup. Just for me. He came into the kitchen, sniffing the air. You didn't make enough for both of us? He asked. No. You okay? I'm fine. I sat by the window with my bowl. Snow drifted past the glass. It looked beautiful from the warmth of the room, but I knew how cold it was out there. I had lived in that cold for years, even inside this home. He ordered food, sat across from me, watching a video on his phone. Said something about trending topics. I nodded at the right moments. But I wasn't listening. I was already halfway gone. One night, I received an email. It was from a research coordinator, a polite, professional message asking if I could verify some original sources related to his early academic work. Apparently, they were archiving foundational texts, and something in the files he submitted didn't line up. I read it twice. My heartbeat didn't change. There was no glee, no vengeance rising. Just a soft awareness, like something inevitable had finally arrived. I replied. I didn't accuse. I didn't explain. I simply attached 3 documents, labeled clearly, with dates, metadata, and context. No commentary. Just facts. Let them decide what mattered. Let the record show what he chose to forget. The next morning, he was cheerful. He had no idea. He made jokes over toast, talked about potential speaking offers. I smiled. And in that moment, I realized he didn't see it coming. Not because I was sneaky, but because he had never imagined I could move without him. That I could think, choose, act. Not to destroy him, but to stop dissolving myself. I started visiting places I hadn't been in years. The library, a quiet cafe near the river, an old bookstore where the owner still remembered my name. I read poetry again. I stopped dressing for him, stopped checking if he noticed when I left the room. Because suddenly it didn't matter. I wasn't disappearing anymore. I was returning. He noticed eventually, not the details, but the absence. The things I used to do without being asked. He asked, "Are we okay?" I tilted my head. "Why wouldn't we be? You just feel different." "I am." He opened his mouth, searching for the right question. But there wasn't one. Because the truth was, I wasn't trying to change him. I was simply done rearranging myself to fit inside his story. I never raised my voice. I didn't accuse, defend, or explain. I just stepped away. And one by one, the things I used to carry began to fall. The shift began in ways he didn't understand at first. He thought I was being moody, tired, maybe even passive-aggressive. He'd seen me upset before, brief, contained frustration that passed once I'd explained myself, once he had given me the space to cool down. But this time I gave no warning, because this time I wasn't upset. I was simply done. He stood in the kitchen one morning, turning in circles. "Where are the invoices from last quarter?" I swear I had them saved. I sipped my tea. "They're not in my folder anymore." He looked up. "Did you delete them?" "No." "Then where?" "They were your invoices." His mouth opened, then closed. He stared at me like I had spoken a language he didn't recognize. A week later, he missed a deadline. A significant one. I didn't remind him because I no longer kept track of his calendar. He spent hours apologizing to his client, redrafting a presentation he once would have dropped into my lap. He didn't say it out loud, but I could see it, the panic of someone who'd grown used to invisible scaffolding, now standing on a stage with nothing behind the curtain. He called me from his office, voice tight. "I can't believe I forgot this. I've got too much going on." I let the silence stretch for a few seconds, then simply said yes. He waited for more. A solution. Comfort. Blame. Anything. But I had none to give. That was the cost of becoming his background. When I finally faded, all he could hear was the silence. It didn't take long for the ripple to reach the others. His assistant texted me one afternoon. "Hey, just wondering if you know where he keeps the backup files for the grant proposal. He said you usually handle the formatting." I stared at the message. I didn't answer right away. Then I typed, "I don't work on those anymore. He'll know where to find them." I left it at that. No emojis. No explanations. She didn't reply. The following week, I received an email, not addressed to me directly, but forwarded by accident. One of his colleagues. Polite language. Formal concern. It said, "Some inconsistencies in his early work have come up. We're not accusing him of anything, of course, just want to understand who contributed what." I stared at the words, my heart calm, steady. There was no thrill in it. Just inevitability. He came home early that evening, flustered. The door closed a little too hard. He dropped his bag in the hallway and went straight to his study. I heard drawers open and close, keys tapping, his voice muttering under his breath. He didn't come out for an hour. When he did, his eyes were wary. "Have you heard anything strange lately?" he asked. I kept my expression neutral. Strange how? Just questions. People looking into things. About the early work. I tilted my head. Why would they do that? He hesitated. "I don't know." Then added, "It's probably just academic housekeeping." I nodded, let the pause grow uncomfortable. Then turned back to my book. Didn't offer help. Didn't offer anything. He stood there for a moment longer, then walked away. The next few days were filled with tension that wasn't spoken aloud. The air in the apartment changed. He watched me more, but with hesitation, not affection. I could see the calculations in his eyes, the inventory he was suddenly taking of everything I used to do, everything that now sat undone, waiting for no one. He was unraveling, and I was no longer holding the threads. He began speaking to me differently, more compliments, more questions. "You've been so quiet lately. I didn't realize how much I rely on you." Or, "You're really the one who keeps this place running." Or, "Hey, I know I've been distracted, but I do appreciate everything you've done." Each sentence was carefully phrased. Too careful, because now he was aware. Not of my value, not truly, but of my absence. It's funny how quickly people notice the weight you carried once you set it down. One morning, I found a small bouquet of flowers in the kitchen. No note, just left there. I stared at them for a long time. They were my favorite, or at least, the ones he had assumed were. But the truth was, I hadn't liked lilies in years. They reminded me of hospital rooms. Still, I put them in water. Not out of sentiment, out of habit. Then came the meeting request. An email sent to both of us from an internal review board. A quiet inquiry. Nothing aggressive, just a conversation about authorship, about archived drafts. I forwarded it to him without comment. That evening, he didn't say a word about it. But he didn't sleep. I heard him shifting all night, the creak of the mattress with each turn, the faint glow of his phone screen against the wall. By morning, he looked like someone holding his breath underwater. The silence between us had grown into something else now, not passive, not angry, just final. He tried once more to breach it. Sat next to me on the couch, leaned in, voice low. "Look, I know I've made mistakes." I stayed still. "I know I haven't always said thank you, or noticed things, but I do now." I looked at him, slow and steady, and asked, "Why now?" He opened his mouth, then stopped. No answer came, because deep down, he knew. It wasn't gratitude. It was fear. The people around him began to feel the shift too. His assistants stopped reaching out to me. His clients sent fewer referrals. One organization quietly removed his photo from a newsletter, citing pending clarification. Still, I said nothing. Still, I did nothing more than let truth do what truth does. Surface. One night, I found him in his study, just sitting. No laptop open. No phone in hand. Just sitting. I paused in the doorway. He looked up. There was no arrogance in his face anymore. Just confusion. "Did I really lose you?" he asked. I wanted to say, "You never had me. You had my labor, my belief, my silence." But I didn't. I said only this: "You stopped seeing me a long time ago. Now I'm just catching up." He didn't argue. He didn't ask me to stay. And for once, I didn't want him to. In the days that followed, the house grew quieter, not just with sound, with presence. He moved like someone who had forgotten how to belong in his own life. And I, for the first time, wasn't reaching to fix it. Let it fall. Let the pieces scatter. Let him learn what it means to be alone with the truth. Because the most powerful refusal isn't loud. It's silence. It's withholding. Not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. I wasn't punishing him. I was preserving myself. And slowly, the world he built on the bones of my sacrifice began to feel what I had lived with for years. The unbearable weight of being unseen. There wasn't a dramatic goodbye. No screaming. No doors slamming. Only a long, quiet breath. And then, the soft decision to leave, without running, without rage. Just peace. The final message came on a Thursday. I remember because the sky outside was pale gray, the kind that looks neither like morning nor afternoon. I was sitting on the couch, legs folded under me, reading a book I'd meant to start months ago. Something about finding stillness, about returning to yourself. The irony wasn't lost on me. My phone buzzed once. I nearly didn't check it, assuming it was a work notification. But when I saw the name on the screen, I froze. Not him. Someone else. Someone I hadn't heard from in years. It was a short message, just a few lines. I saw the talk he gave last year. The one on interdisciplinary ethics. You were the one who did the groundwork for that, weren't you? I never forgot how much time you spent helping me even when no one else saw me. Thank you. Just, thank you. I read it 3 times. And then I cried. Not because it hurt. Because someone remembered. Because someone saw. Not the version of me that stood behind the man on the stage, but the one who had stayed up late writing, the one who had explained the concept 5 different ways until it clicked, the one who believed in others without needing credit. That message, it wasn't an apology. It was recognition. And after years of being useful but invisible, that felt like more than enough. He noticed my silence more these days. Not because he missed me, not really, but because things no longer flowed as they used to. He tried again. A note on the counter. "Dinner tonight? Just us. Let's talk." I stared at the handwriting. His usual, rushed script. It looked almost careful now. I didn't throw it away. I didn't reply either. Instead, I went to my closet, took out the box I hadn't opened in over a year. The one with my old notebooks, ideas I had put aside, plans I never followed because his dreams had taken up all the space. I sat on the floor and flipped through them. There were fragments, beginnings of essays, outlines for workshops I once wanted to lead, pages filled with quotes, questions, reflections. Some of it felt distant, written by a version of me I no longer knew. But not all of it. One page, in particular, stopped me. At the top, "You don't have to be the hero in someone else's story just to feel real." Below it, a simple question. Who would you be if you stopped trying to be good? I hadn't answered it then, but now I could. Later that night, he returned home with a hopeful energy. "I picked up your favorite." That little place on West Street, he said, holding up the takeout bag. You remember? I did remember. I just didn't care. He set the table, poured 2 glasses of wine, lit a candle. The effort was there. The sincerity, maybe. But it was too late. Not because I was angry. I wasn't. I was full. Of silence. Of understanding. Of something new I didn't have a name for yet, something that tasted like freedom. He looked across the table. You haven't said anything. I nodded. I don't have much left to say. I know I've been distracted. I know I didn't see everything I should have. But we've been through so much. Doesn't that count for something? I watched him carefully, my voice low and steady. It does. That's why I'm not yelling. He didn't know how to respond to that. He tried again. I just want to fix it. I almost smiled. Not from cruelty, from recognition. That's what I used to say. I just want to fix it. Over the next few days, he tried harder. He folded laundry. He ordered the groceries. He even cleaned the stovetop, a task he once joked was impossible. But it wasn't about the dishes. It never had been. It was about erasure. About building a world on someone else's strength and forgetting to name them in the credits. The applause had faded now, and he was left trying to rebuild comfort with hands that had never done the building. More messages came. Not from him. From others. A student I mentored thanked me for helping her get into grad school. A former colleague shared a podcast where he quoted one of my early essays, unknowingly, but still carrying my words. An old friend sent me a photo of a dinner we had years ago, one where I had laughed so freely I didn't recognize myself. Piece by piece, I was reminded that I hadn't been invisible to everyone. Just to the people I gave the most to. He asked me one evening why I'd stopped doing certain things. The birthday reminders. The anniversary calendar. The quiet support that made his world glide without friction. I answered simply, because it cost me too much to keep doing it. He stared at me. You never said anything. I gave a half smile. I did. Just not in words you were listening for. He looked away. And that was when I knew he would never fully understand. Not because he was cruel, but because he never had to pay attention to what he didn't want to see. And I had made that too easy. The morning I left, it wasn't dramatic. I packed slowly. Only the things that were mine. The books he never read, the mug I always used, the notebooks with my handwriting. A few pieces of clothing. Some letters I had written to myself. I left behind the joint projects, the memories bound to him, the weight of proving I'd mattered. I didn't need to prove it anymore. I left a note. Nothing poetic. Just honest. I gave you more than you saw. And I won't keep doing that for someone who only looks when things start to fall apart. I'm not angry. I just finally chose me. Outside, the snow had stopped. The sky was clear, pale, wide, almost blue. I walked with a single bag over my shoulder, coat buttoned, scarf tight. The cold bit at my fingers. But I didn't flinch. With every step, I felt something loosen inside me. Not grief. Not regret. Relief. Not because he was gone, but because I was no longer disappearing in my own life. I moved into a small space. Quiet. Light. The kind of place that didn't need much to feel like home. There were no framed awards. No overdue calendars. Just a shelf for books I wanted to read. A desk. A window. And the first photo I placed wasn't of him. It was of me. Not posed. Not filtered. Just a candid photo a friend had once taken, me mid-laugh, eyes wide, leaning back in a chair, hair undone. I looked alive in it. Real. That was who I was returning to. Some nights, I still wake up thinking I hear his voice. A habit, like muscle memory. But then I remember where I am. And I breathe. In. Out. It's quiet. But not empty. That's the difference. The final message came weeks later. A simple email. I understand now. I hope you're well. I didn't reply. Not because I hated him, but because there was nothing else to say. Freedom didn't arrive with trumpets. It came in small things. Sleeping through the night. laughing without watching someone's reaction, making a meal for myself and only myself, not feeling like a ghost in my own story. I still keep the letter from that student, the one who thanked me. I keep it not because I need proof, but because it reminds me of the truth I once forgot. You don't have to earn love by disappearing. You don't have to break yourself to hold someone else together. And rejection, when it finally comes, can sometimes be the most honest form of love. Not from others, but for yourself. Because walking away doesn't mean you failed. Sometimes it means you finally came home.